Picture this. It is 3 a.m. in the Strait of Hormuz. A tanker captain receives a direct order from his company. Do not enter. Insurance pulled, legal exposure too high. And he is not alone. Every major shipping firm on Earth has issued the same directive. Through that 33-kilometer passage, which normally sees over 100 vessels per day, fewer than a dozen ships have moved since the ceasefire was announced. Both sides say they won. Both sides are describing a completely different agreement. And the world's energy markets are watching every ship that enters or exits that strait in real time, treating each vessel as a vote on whether this peace deal is real. This is the story of the Strait of Hormuz, the Iran ceasefire, and why the next 14 days may be the most consequential in modern Middle East history. Subscribe now and turn on notifications. This story moves by the hour. The Strait of Hormuz is a narrow choke point at the mouth of the Persian Gulf, bordered on the north by Iran and on the south by Oman. At its narrowest, it is just 33 kilometers wide. Through that corridor flows approximately 20% of global oil supplies and roughly 30% of the world's liquefied natural gas. It also carries a third of the planet's urea fertilizer exports. Before this crisis, maritime analytics firm Kepler documented between 100 and 120 commercial vessels transiting every single day. If this strait closes, energy prices spike worldwide. Fertilizer becomes scarce. Every economy on the planet feels it. And that is precisely why Iran chose it as its primary weapon. The war that brought us here began on February 28th, when the United States and Israel launched a coordinated military campaign against Iran. The Pentagon named it Operation Epic Fury. Targets included Iranian military infrastructure, nuclear facilities, and command networks. Within 40 days, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth stood at a Pentagon briefing and declared, in his own words, a historic and overwhelming victory, stating Iran had been rendered combat ineffective for years to come. But Iran did not go quiet. It closed the strait, not completely, but effectively. West Texas Intermediate crude surged past $90 per barrel. Shipping companies began routing around the strait entirely, some going all the way around the Cape of Good Hope. Then on April 8th, President Trump announced a 2-week ceasefire on Truth Social. He said the U.S. had met and exceeded all military objectives and was very far along on a definitive agreement for long-term peace. The ceasefire was conditional on Iran agreeing to the complete, immediate, and safe opening of the Strait of Hormuz. He called Iran's submitted 10-point peace proposal a workable basis for negotiation. Iran's Supreme National Security Council confirmed the agreement almost immediately. And here is where things get complicated. Iran's statement, released through Tasnim news agency, affiliated with the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, claimed the deal included continued Iranian control over the Strait of Hormuz. The United States did not confirm that, not at all. Both sides claiming victory, both sides describing a different agreement. We will come back to what that gap means for the Islamabad talks, because it is the central tension of this entire story. First, the ground truth in the strait. As of Thursday morning, fewer than a dozen vessels had transited since the ceasefire was announced. 6 cargo carriers, 1 tanker owned by a Chinese company, 1 Gabon-flagged vessel carrying 7,000 tons of Emirati fuel oil to India, the first non-Iranian tanker to pass after the truce. That is not a reopening, that is a trickle. And when Iran did outline its conditions, they were striking. According to a regional official cited by the Associated Press, Tehran intended to allow no more than 15 vessels per day and to charge tolls on ships transiting, with revenue designated for reconstruction of Iran. Trump went on Truth Social to warn Iran directly not to charge tankers, demanding the strait be opened without limitation. Defense Secretary Hegseth said flatly at a briefing, "The strait is open." Joint Chiefs Chairman Dan Kane, when pressed, said, "I believe so, based on the diplomatic negotiation." That hedge tells you everything about the certainty on the ground. And then things got worse. An Iranian news agency reported that tanker traffic had halted again, hours after the first ships passed through. The stated reason? Israel strikes in Lebanon. This brings us to the second crisis threatening to unravel everything. Hezbollah, the Iran-backed militant group in southern Lebanon, has been firing rockets at Israel throughout this conflict. Iran funds Hezbollah. Its operations, its weapons, its salaries. Israel responded. On Wednesday, according to Lebanese health authorities, Israeli strikes killed at least 254 people. A single airstrike on an apartment building in Beirut killed over 200 civilians, in an area where residents received no warning. The strike was the largest of the entire 40-day war, and it came hours after the ceasefire was announced. Here is the central dispute. Was Lebanon included in the ceasefire or not? President Trump's announcement does not mention Lebanon once, but Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, the key mediator, explicitly wrote in his statement, "An immediate ceasefire everywhere, including Lebanon and elsewhere." Iran's IRGC immediately cited the strikes as justification for halting shipping through the strait again. Vice President Vance pushed back, telling reporters, "I think the Iranians thought that the ceasefire included Lebanon, and it just didn't. We never made that promise." He described Lebanon as a separate skirmish. According to sources cited by CNN, Trump called Netanyahu privately and asked him to dial back Lebanon operations to avoid derailing the Iran talks. The human cost in Lebanon is devastating. The International Rescue Committee's David Miliband described anger in every direction. At Hezbollah for dragging Lebanon into the war, at Israel for the conduct of the campaign, at America, at European governments. His own organization had been forced to cut Lebanon's staff from 220 to 105 people because of funding cuts. Research from the Center for Global Development showed that aid cuts over the past year have led to a 5% increase in global conflict levels. The death toll from Israeli strikes on Lebanon since the start of the war, over 1,500 people. From Hezbollah rocket fire into Israel, 23. If this analysis is valuable to you, please like and share this video and subscribe if you have not already. Now, the single most confusing element of this crisis, the 10-point peace plan. Because there isn't one, there are three. Vice President Vance spelled this out directly. The first version was submitted to envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. Vance said it was so poorly constructed it was likely written by an AI chatbot, specifically naming ChatGPT, and was immediately rejected. The second version was the product of genuine back-and-forth negotiation, more reasonable, and this is the document Trump called a workable basis for negotiation. The third version appeared on Iranian social media and public access television, a maximalist document with far more aggressive demands than the actual negotiating text. Vance criticized media organizations for treating this third version as Iran's official position, calling the sourcing little more than, in his words, a random Yahoo in Iran submitting material to local television. This is a window into Iran's internal fractures. The official government has committed to negotiating. The IRGC, whose commanders gained enormous influence during this war, does not want the war to end. A peace deal threatens their consolidated power. Hardliners at the fringes reject any negotiation with America entirely. Vance acknowledged the U.S. had to figure out who actually held power inside Iran before they could negotiate with the right people. The ceasefire is holding not because everyone in Tehran supports it, but because the faction currently at the top of the decision tree has decided, for now, it serves their interests. This brings us to Islamabad. Today, April 10th, VP Vance, alongside Witkoff and Kushner, is scheduled to meet Iranian counterparts in Pakistan's capital. The Council on Foreign Relations published a sobering assessment by senior fellow Stephen Cook. There has been no regime change in Iran, the leadership is no less radical than its predecessors, and Iran now has leverage over the Strait of Hormuz it simply did not have before the war began. The U.S. military campaign degraded Iran's conventional capacity, but it handed Iran a powerful new card, the demonstrated ability to choke off global energy supplies. A lever no military strike can bomb away. Iran's supreme leader made this explicit after the ceasefire, stating Iran would bring management of the Strait of Hormuz into a new phase, that Iran would certainly punish the aggressors, and demanding compensation for all damages. This is not the language of a defeated nation. This is the language of a government that believes it gained more than it lost. The market reaction confirms the stakes. When Trump announced the ceasefire, WTI crude plunged 16% in a single session, settling at $94.41 per barrel. The Dow Jones had its best single day in over a year. By Thursday, the euphoria was already fading. WTI climbed back above $96. Japan's Nikkei fell. Hong Kong's Hang Seng opened down. According to energy advisor Tom Cloza of Gulf Oil, it will take time before straight traffic changes reach the pump. California imports roughly 75% of its crude, with nearly a third from the Middle East. A prolonged Hormuz disruption reaches gas prices, home heating costs, the price of plastic and fertilizer, and virtually every manufactured good. Here is where we stand. The ceasefire is holding, barely. No major U.S. strikes have resumed. The Islamabad talks begin today. But the strait is not meaningfully open. Iran is still asserting operational control. Sea mines may be present. Hezbollah is still firing rockets at Israel. And inside Iran, the IRGC is actively working against a peace deal. Iran's demands include continued control over the strait, lifting of sanctions, release of frozen assets, and withdrawal of U.S. forces from the region. Trump has stated firmly Iran will not be permitted to enrich uranium, and all U.S. military assets remain in position. Those positions are not close to each other. Vance was direct before departing for Pakistan. The president is very, very clear. What the U.S. gives is the ceasefire. What Iran gives is the reopening of the straits. If that doesn't happen, the president will not abide by the terms. Trump left no ambiguity on Truth Social. If terms are not met, in his own words, then the shooting starts, bigger and better and stronger than anyone has ever seen before. 2 weeks, 14 days to resolve questions about uranium enrichment, the Strait of Hormuz, sanctions, and proxy groups in Lebanon. A successful negotiation could end a war, stabilize oil markets, and reduce the nuclear proliferation threat. A failure could mean a return to conflict on a scale not yet seen. Sitting in the middle of all of it, 33 kilometers of ocean, 1/5 of the world's oil. The narrow channel through which the fate of the Middle East is now being decided. We will be here for every development. Like this video if it gave you value. Share it with someone who needs to understand what is actually happening right now. And if you have not subscribed yet, hit that button, because this story is not over, it is just beginning.